Good morning and welcome. I'm Steve Lindy, and this is the Policy and Diplomacy Forum. You've come to the right place. Our first session, the International Affairs Forum, is chaired by Daniel Mariaschin and Bobby Rechnitz. This forum features voices with deep experience in advocacy, strategy, and international relations. Please join me in welcoming our esteemed speakers, Malcolm Honline, Brian Leib, Fiamma Nierenstein, Ambassador Mark Regev, Sam Van Roy, and Gerald M. Steinberg. And without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to our chairs for this panel.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you all for coming for this important program, which is titled International Affairs, to which I've added Challenges and Opportunities since October 7th. In the year and a half since October 7th, Israel and the Jewish community have had to confront a torrent of blood libels, misinformation, disinformation, and lies about its defensive war in Gaza. These verbal assaults are seemingly everywhere we look, from senior international political leaders and diplomats, including members of the United States Congress, to the various agencies of the United Nations, to university campuses, to nearly the entire NGO human rights universe, to much of the media, and in the street, where bullying, intimidating demonstrations, many in New York City, the traditional motherlode of American Jewry, have become a regular feature of city life in capital cities around the world. This cascade of hypercriticism and vitriol uses much of the same language, assuming that if you repeat a lie enough times, it'll stick. So what is being said? Let's just go over a very short sampler. Francesca Albanese, for example, the UN Special Rapporteur for the Occupied Territories, that's her title, said in a British TV interview last month, "We have not done enough to prevent the genocide of the Palestinian people," going on to say that Israel intentionally hits all schools, hospitals, and farmland. And she has been among, as you know, the most strident purveyors of the genocide blood libel. Hardly days into the war, the president of Chile, Gabriel Boric, described Israel's conduct of the war as barbarian. His counterpart in Colombia, the president Gustavo Petro, called Israel's government genocidal and charged Israel's then defense minister Yoav Gallant with using language akin to what the Nazis said about the Jews. Belgium's then Minister of Development Cooperation, Caroline Guinez, asked why we should stand idly by in the face of so much disproportionate violence against a civilian population, even if it is in retaliation for an act of terrorism. She also criticized Germany for its support of Israel, asking, quote, "German friends, are you really going to be on the wrong side of history twice?" Simon Harris, then Ireland's prime minister, called Israel's response to the massacres of October 7th, quote, "something approaching revenge." And he went on to say, "Europe will be on the wrong side of history if it fails to stop the bloodshed." And then there was the rush by some in Congress, in the US Congress, to demand, quote, "conditionality on providing weapons to Israel." Indeed, several European countries announced suspensions or bans on the sale of weapons to Israel during that particular feeding frenzy. And who can forget Congresswoman Elise Stefanik's epic questioning of 3 university presidents who refused to condemn the Palestinian demonstrators' call for genocide of the Jews as crossing their red lines, their code of conduct. It depends on the context, you remember, was the answer of Harvard's then president. Harvard is now fighting attempts to cancel its government contracts instead of conceding its failed efforts in protecting Jewish students' rights under Title VI of the U.S. Civil Rights Act. And just a few weeks ago, at a demonstration outside a hall at Princeton University where Naftali Bennett was speaking, and the speech was interrupted by a fire alarm. You know how that works. A pro-Palestinian demonstrator yelled, "Go back to Europe." One Jewish student said that some protesters shouted, "Inbred swine," at her and other Jewish students. So it has gone far from the river to the sea to inbred swine. This slippery slope didn't take very long to materialize. Now, to help us sort out the challenges and the opportunities, we've assembled a panel of experts deeply involved in the battles that have erupted over the past year and a half. Each has been long involved in pro-Israel advocacy before October 7th, and they bring a time-tested depth of knowledge and best practices to the discussion. Our panelists are being asked to present policy recommendations that will be incorporated into a final document at the conclusion of the conference. Notes are being taken here very carefully, and it's very important. We want recommendations in addition to analysis. So let me go quickly through our list of speakers. You heard their names, but I want to give them their due. When I conclude, I'd like to call on the chairman of this session, Bobby Rechnitz, to speak, and then we'll get into our discussion. So we have alphabetically Malcolm Hohenlein, CEO and Vice Chairman Emeritus of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations; Brian Leib, Managing Director of Henry Public Relations and Senior Fellow at the Center for Fundamental Rights in Budapest; Fiamma Nierenstein, journalist and author, former Deputy President of the Italian Parliament's Foreign Affairs Commission; Mark Regev, co-host of JNS's podcast Israel Undiplomatic, former ambassador to the United Kingdom, chair of the Abba Eban Institute at Reichman University, and a former foreign affairs advisor to the Prime Minister; Sam Van Rooij, author, member of the Chamber of Representatives of Belgium and city councillor in Antwerp; and last but certainly never least, Gerald Steinberg, founder and president of NGO Monitor and professor emeritus of political science at Bar Ilan University. Our format will work like this. I will ask each participant a question focused on their special field of expertise and their present activity. I am under strict instructions to watch the clock, and there's a giant clock down there which is already, I think, not correct. I think we've lost about 15 minutes. And we have a short period to unpack an entire basket of issues. So to each participant, please include in your response a policy recommendation that can be incorporated into the final policy paper to be issued at the end of our deliberations tomorrow. But before we begin, I want to call on Bobby Rechnitz, the chairman of this session on international affairs, for his comments.
Thank you, Daniel. Welcome to all of our panel. I'd like to divide my comments into 5 areas: overview of changing dynamics, how Israel can cope with the changes, key opportunities, and challenges and threats to watch. Actually, 4 areas. Since October 7th, Israel faces a fundamentally different international landscape. Public opinion, diplomatic alliances, and security priorities have all shifted dramatically. Global sympathy after October 7th quickly gave way to sharp criticism over the war in Gaza, especially in Western democracies. The Russia-Ukraine war has altered the global alliances, with Russia pivoting towards Iran and the global south gaining more diplomatic influence. The Islamic Republic of Iran's ring of the axis of resistance has all but disappeared. Turkey's increasing belligerence towards Israel, its role in Syria, and internal disturbances are something that we need to address that are of great concern. How can Israel cope with the challenges? First, Israel can ensure a close relationship with the American administration. We can see how things can quickly change, and a change in Israel's leadership might end the honeymoon. Israel should not be too partisan and should maintain very good relations with both Republican and Democratic parties, regardless of the challenge. Israel should maintain good relations with as many nations as possible and world leaders, including political and religious. My opinion is that Israel could have participated in the funeral of the Pope. Israel should work with other nations to influence a change in Turkey's behavior. Their membership in NATO should be constantly challenged and questioned internationally. What are the key opportunities? First of all, Abraham Accords expansion. Despite tensions, Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states still have interests in normalization with Israel. Tech and innovation diplomacy. Israel's leadership in AI, cybersecurity, and climate tech can be leveraged for new partnerships globally. Eastern Mediterranean Alliance. Cooperation with Greece, Syria, and Egypt can provide new energy and security frameworks. And engaging the global South. As Western support becomes more complicated, relationships with countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America should be strengthened. And last, the challenges and threats to watch, which we all know too well. The erosion of bipartisan US support. American politics is increasingly polarized. Israel has to avoid becoming more of a partisan issue. Lawfare and the ICC cases. Growing international legal challenges to Israel's military actions pose reputational and strategic risks and must be addressed on every level. Iran and its proxies. The Ayatollahs are down, but not out. We have to ensure that they cannot rearm and build what was lost. Rise of campus activism and BDS 2.0. A younger generation in the West views Israel far more critically than previous generations, and this could reshape public opinion over the next decade. And lastly, changing Jewish diaspora dynamics. Alienation among youth today is at an all-time high. There are more liberal-leaning Jews towards Israel that could weaken their support. These are the challenges that we have to deal with. My recommendation to all of them is, aside from living in Israel and making Israel stronger, everyone here is an advocate. Everyone has the power to make a change. Contact a political representative, advocate. If you're from the United States, go to Washington. Everyone has equal access. You can advocate. It's not only a matter of contributing your resources, it's a matter of contributing your time and efforts. Everyone can do it, and we all see the results from it. Thank you.
Bobby, thank you very much. Microphones, are they working? Yep. No. It is working now? Yes, okay. All right, so how do we effectively respond to these challenges? In my 5 decades of work in pro-Israel advocacy, I've never seen such a wide band of provocation from so many quarters, some expected, some unexpected, in such ferocity. Are there new ways to fight back? What can Israel and the pro-Israel advocacy community do to turn the tables? Are there friends and allies we've not yet approached? Best practices that are working on, that folks are working on, those at the table and others, which should be capitalized. Let's talk about that. Malcolm, let's begin with you. As the Dean of Jewish Professionals, among your many efforts over the years, many times behind the scenes, to enlist allies to Israel's cause, you've worked particularly closely over decades with the pro-Israel Christian community. We know its importance in everything from letter writing to members of Congress to local rallies in support of Israel to voting in congressional and presidential elections. Since October 7th, what have you seen in this community that might be different from before, and how can we further build on its support? And to that, let me add another question. You're also working now on education, something that we've not paid a lot of attention to, but you are, on K through 12 education and what young people are learning about Israel and the Palestinians. So with that, the floor is yours.
Is that a question?
It's a
That was
kind
good.
of.
Okay, so it's different than the topic we were given, but I'm happy to address both. First, on the international level and some of the issues that Bobby raised, I think that this is a very critical moment for us on the international scale when we look at the challenges of globalization, which we were not prepared for, although we were the first globalized people, as Benjamin Mitudela attested. and we created industries because we were globalized people, like the diamond industry. We were not prepared for the changes in the world. And the truth is that the one characteristic that I think can amply describe our situation is chaos. And Jews do not do well in chaos. So we have to work extra hard to try and identify the solutions and things that we can do, and especially with the growing sense of isolationism, both in America and in the Christian communities that you mentioned, but also internationally. So I'll offer some prescriptions for both, and I'll try to do it within the 3 minutes that we were given. One is, I believe there are unique opportunities to expand the Abraham Accord, but we're going about it the wrong way. Saudi Arabia is not the door to the expansion of the Abraham Accords. They will come along when they see Muslim countries in Africa, Central Asia, and others going into the Abraham Accords. Diplomatic relations should be an outcome, not the initiation. We should start by doing business, by economic trade, tourism, showing the people the benefit of association with Israel and being part of a regional association. We, and under the leadership of Dan and Greek Americans, when Greece, Israel, and Cyprus were not talking, and in fact had a very conflicted relationship, we reached into the Greek community and together went to visit the leaders of the three countries once, twice, and by the third time, we arranged the tripartite meeting that has led to the relationship that now benefits all, and many, many other countries want to be part of that Mediterranean initiative. Similarly, I've had outreach from countries across Central Asia to Korea to Japan, wanting to be part of the expanded Abraham Accords. Even countries like Pakistan, Indonesia, and Malaysia, many businessmen want to be part of it, and we can bring them in. Diplomatic relations will follow. It should not be the initial thrust. We spend 2 years negotiating a piece of paper that means nothing the day after. Create facts on the ground. Then you will see Saudi Arabia coming running into it as well. So I think we have a real opportunity with expanding the Abraham Accords, the Mediterranean Initiative, and building literally a worldwide counter to the Road and Belt Initiative, to Russian aggression, to Iran, and to Turkey. And it will not involve having to have troops. We can create facts on the ground. Second, I think we have to do much more in the terms of reaching into domestic constituencies, building alliances with them. Africa, Asia, and South America offer many opportunities. We neglect them, and they resent it. We have to do more to reach out. Israel has so much to offer, as was mentioned, in technology, harvest reclamation, water reclamation, so many areas where we can build ties and expand the relationships. Europe, we should not write off, although I don't believe there's much of a future for Europe, but we should still continue to reach out to friends and allies in those countries to build up relationships, because they are still a critical player. I think that there are examples. For instance, at the March of the Living last week, Danny Danon led 30 ambassadors from the UN. It doesn't matter how important those particular countries are, as much as the fact that they came, participated, and bring back the messages to their home countries. And we have to do much more in creative ways to reach out to people who represent the countries, and many, many want to visit Israel. They're just not given the opportunity. So we have to do more in that, and we have to focus on the common concerns. And this applies to the domestic constituencies as well, to the Christian communities, especially evangelical communities, which we have done a lot to sometimes insult or drive away. I understand all the concerns, and believe me, led some of the initial efforts, but also associated, and we have here Pastor Hagee will be with us tomorrow and tonight, 10 million members, the largest pro-Israel organization in America. And I know there's a lot of concern about their youth and losing their youth, but that has to do with us identifying the enemy as being anti-American, anti-West, against the values that we have. It's not just against Israel, and it's not just against Jews. To get them to associate and understand what their stake is in what we're doing. When we tell them, and when you tell parents, that K-12 education in America is being hijacked, the money we see on the campuses pales sometimes in comparison to what's being invested in high schools. In Queens, you have high schools with wall-sized maps of the Middle East without Israel. And when I confronted one of the superintendents, he said, well, why would Israel? This is a map about Arab culture. No, there's no Arab culture in Israel. And they don't speak Arabic there. And that has been up there for 6 years. But there's much more serious things when kindergartens are marched out of their classrooms in various cities across America to protest at a synagogue against Israel. And we have to show parents how their children are being endangered by this, not just because it's against Israel, but because it's against them, and it's against the things they believe. We're also seeing trends in religious extremism coming back in America. We have to work with the moderates to reinforce those images and those messages. But a lot of it depends on us. You know, when the Jews said we were like grasshoppers, kachagavim, in the eyes of the giants never said that we were grasshoppers. It was the Jews who said it. Jews have to today recognize that we're the giants, that we have the right cause, we have the right messages. We just have to do much more, and we have to revolutionize the way we go about our relationships. That means internally in our community, and I'll give some ideas on that, but I think that also externally, and that means reaching out to countries. You'd be surprised how many will be receptive to visits, to initiation of business exchanges, and wanting to have a relationship, particularly at Israel. They all tell me, including Arab leaders, how much Israel has to offer them. We have to see to it that the opportunities are created, and I believe that we can build from Morocco to Australia a band that will strengthen the world, bring democracy and assurances of security, especially for Israel.
Malcolm, thank you. Thank you. It shows how much you can get in 5.5 minutes. So,
your watch is fast.
Yeah. Brian, you're the managing director of a public relations firm. Given the many issues that we're confronting today, should we be prioritizing the responses to this incoming verbal artillery from Israel's enemies and hypercritics? And if so, what would the order of priority look like? Is there messaging that works and some which doesn't? And re the latter, what new messages would you add to counter and turn back the blood libels and the mistruths?
Well, first of all, it's an absolute honor to be sitting here on this panel with all of you, and also to be following Malcolm. It's a very tall order to follow a gentleman like this, so it's an honor to be here with all of you. I'll touch a little bit on that. I think we have to talk about realities. There's a lot of misconceptions about Israel. There's a lot of falsehoods that are spread about Israel. Let's talk about realities. One of the biggest realities that I've seen in my activism, my pro-Israel activism over the last decade, is Jews from the left and from the right, and non-Jews also from around America, continue to push this narrative and this hope and this desire for there to be two states. I'm sorry. I don't see how there's ever going to be two states. And I think we should be speaking in the reality that there will only ever be one state. It's the state of Israel. We know how many Arabs are living here in Israel already. And I think we should probably, from a messaging perspective, start saying that. Maybe that doesn't look good on the world stage to say that there's never going to be a state for the Palestinian people. But I don't know. Maybe that's okay. So listen, let me just briefly, because I know we have a lot of people to get through here, just a couple realities that I want to mention. We had 4 years of President Joe Biden, and we've had 3 months of President Donald J. Trump. The reality of terms of what were the 4 years versus these 3 months is completely night and day. It's absolutely night and day. You had one president who was sanctioning Israelis, sanctioning IDF units, Israeli businesses, post-October 7th. And now you have one president who is saying that there is absolutely no daylight at all between the United States of America and Israel. Second, Malcolm mentioned Europe. Europe, again, speaking in realities, Europe is gone. Other than a couple countries, Europe is gone. It is lost. It's a very dark place. I have the great fortune of being involved with the Center for Fundamental Rights, which is in Hungary, and I visit Hungary many times. I must tell you, there is no safer place for Jews in Europe than in Hungary. their belief in Judeo-Christian values and supporting the Jewish community and supporting the state of Israel is second to none. Sitting here on this panel is Sam Van Roy, who's a member of the Patriots for Europe, which was actually started in Hungary. So I think, again, realities are we have to stop talking about two states. We have to start recognizing who our friends are in Europe and who our friends are not in Europe. And also recognize that there is a golden opportunity right now for the state of Israel and the pro-Israel community with the next 3.5 some odd years of President Trump. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Brian. Fiamma, you've served in the Italian Parliament. You've had an impressive career in journalism. So 2 questions. As one who has had a piece, or place, I should say, at the table inside the media, how do you explain the widespread, sometimes lemming-like rush to criticize seemingly every Israeli move on the battlefield, and the pass that Hamas often gets for its genocidal massacres on October 7th? Second question is almost the same as the first. In political circles in the EU, and we're talking about Europe here, is it ideology only that explains this? How much of the jumping on Israel is a fashion? And how much of this can be attributed to pure anti-Semitism? So, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Push it. Yeah, there you go. It's okay. Yeah, it's on. It's okay.
It's okay?
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, I really want to thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here together. And it's also an amazement to see how big this huge organization has prepared our meeting here. And I feel in this a big hint toward the future, you know, mostly because it has been organized by JNS, which is a newspaper, an organization that deals about information, which is my original field. I feel in this that really it gives me a big push toward what I wanted to say here, which is just that we have to start all over from the beginning about this 8th front. Netanyahu has rightly spoken about 7 fronts of war. Here there is an 8th front, which has been terrible. If we have succeeded in winning here and there on these 7 fronts, and I don't want to go back to that, you have said already several things, and on the 8th front, we haven't won the battle. We have to start it all again. You know, there are 3 reasons. You asked about the reasons for that. We have had the newspaper, the public opinion, and we ourselves, the Jews, that have contributed to this failure. First of all, we have been accepted. I mean, the international public opinion have accepted to be informed about such a delicate and dangerous thing as the war in the Middle East, from one side from the New York Times and from the other side from the BBC, which is crazy. I mean, people have been laughing about the things. People that knows has laughed about the things that they were saying, has laughed about their doubt about women that had been raped and killed and reduced slaves in Gaza. No, they have kept repeating that. We have accepted, I mean, the international public opinion, the numbers that they were giving about the death and the children that died. Having afterwards to say in 2 lines that maybe there was something wrong in what they had written before. But at the beginning, everybody would say 40,000 dead, among them half are children, and still this kind of information has invaded the war. Now we have to ask ourselves why we're not able to respond to this. And our answer is not on the side of Asbara. No, we have been trying, myself too, and here with all of the other friends that are sitting with me, to answer to all of these questions, to say the truth, to protest, to be angry, to tell them how morally disgusting was this kind of attitude, how a betrayal of all the West culture and morality this was. it didn't work. It didn't work. All the frontline journalism from New York to Torino, alla Stampa, where I have been working for 20 years. Now I work in another newspaper, but they have all been educated on the liberal leftist side. And what they know is what they have taught them about the division of the world between the rich and the poor, the imperialist and the oppressed. And they have accepted this basic thought. You know that this morning, I'm going quickly, I want to finish with something, but this I cannot contain it, you know. This morning, listening to the Italian reading of the newspaper, there was one of them, La Stampa, is a very important newspaper. La Stampa is a newspaper which is a special expert in foreign affairs, that said we have witnessed yesterday at the funeral of Pope Francisco the first miracle. Number one was Trump discussing with Zelensky, the famous picture we have all seen. And the second one is that Hamas has offered a truce of 5 years. What a gift, you know, what a gift. But there they added, looks like Israel will not be able to accept this great offer of peace because of the pressure of the parties of the very right wing of the colonizers that sit in the parliament. That's the way that they gave the information. Now I want to ask for what I have 1 minute left. 1 minute, and I will tell you it's our fault. It's our fault because we tried all the time to conform to the point of view where we declare ourselves innocent. We are innocent. We are pacifist. We also want peace. We would like one day to have 2 states for 2 people, even if today is not so much. Is not so much the moment, but the moment will come. You know, we have tried to please the international public opinion, declaring that even if now we have to wage war, we will stop as soon as possible. It's not true. We will not stop as soon as possible. We will stop the moment when we finish them. I mean, when we finish them in the ideological way. And this is the way we have to present ourselves. So we will change the public opinion. I stop here because I have no time. I have some more things to say.
No, it would be good if we could get another group 70 minutes, and then we would have enough time. Mark, you've seen it all from the inside as a diplomat, media advisor, and now as an academic. This question is about media strategies. How do you win, and how is it that we're sitting here talking about why it is that we've not been able to overcome many of these issues? I know that years ago, one of the recurring issues in our community was Israeli Hasbara. Why was it working? It wasn't working. You know, I have always thought that asking that question ignored an almost impenetrable wall of hostility at Israel in the major media. Indeed, in recent years, and before October 7th, it seemed to me that the various voices of official Israel in recent years, from the IDF spokesman's unit to the foreign ministry to the PM's office, were on top of their game. Now, let me cite one example. In the early days of the Gaza war, you personally appeared many times, real time, on a host of channels and networks. We all saw Mark when he was interviewed. How has the public information effort stood up over the past 18 months since you started that on the 7th of October? What do you think has worked? What hasn't worked? And since social media, don't leave that out, is now so much a weapon in the anti-Israel quiver of the pro-Palestinian camp, how can we best deal with it?
So,
long list.
I'm not sure. Am I on? You can hear? No. It's not on.
There you go.
You can hear me now. Good. So I'm not sure I can answer all that in the 3 minutes, 5 minutes that I have. But I want to say the following, and that is to answer your core question, which is to talk about strategy and to give a policy recommendation. And if we have time, and I left some of the stuff out that you wanted to discuss, you can come back and say, if we have time. Strategy. The most important thing about strategy in any situation, doesn't matter if you're a businessman or if you're a general moving troops on the field, strategy means being realistic and looking at what you're up against. And we have to confess and we have to admit that Israel is up against opponents / enemies who are immensely powerful. Enemy number one, and Fiamma referred to this, there's the overall zeitgeist, right? The overall zeitgeist across much of the world is that colonialism is bad, imperialism is bad, racism is bad, and guess what? Israel is colonialist, imperialist, and racist. And I remember when I was in London and we had 100 years to the Balfour Declaration, all these Brits said we have to apologize for our imperialist sins and recognizing the right of the Jewish people to a national home is like selling opium to the Chinese. It's like occupying India. Yes, this is what we're up against, an overall zeitgeist which isn't just the progressive left. It goes much, unfortunately, it goes across towards the center and even parts of the respectable right. Yes, there's a zeitgeist out there, and it's very difficult to go against an overwhelming zeitgeist because it's like blowing against the wind. You have to fight. But what is it realistically? It's a very difficult challenge. Number two, and it feeds into your question about the media, is we have a small little problem, and I don't have to go into details with this audience. We have a small little problem with an organization called the United Nations and all its subsidiary groups. Yes, all the, there's everything from UNIFIL to UNRWA, yeah, the General Assembly, the Human Rights Council. I don't need to go into details, not with this audience. But unfortunately, what is the reality? That in most of the world, most of the planet, the UN Secretary General is a secular pope. They are the moral conscience of humanity. And if the United Nations or one of its organizations says Israel is starving children in Gaza, guess what? People believe. And in Israel we don't believe, maybe. And in parts of the United States, though parts of the United States do take UN reports, but we're up against an organization, a supernatural, transnational organization that unfortunately has very positive branding. And it's very difficult. I remember when I was spokesman for the government, I'd go on television and say there's a UN report saying A, B, and C, and I can speak till I'm blue in the face. I've lost before I've opened my mouth because I'm fighting the moral conscience of humanity. And it's not just, I want to stress this, it's not just the Belgian left. Across the world, in Australia, in Canada, in Europe, and definitely in the developing world, the UN is almost holy. Third problem, and then I'll get to, I said I'd talk about, we have to know what we're up against. The ability of Hamas as an authoritarian regime in Gaza to control the visual image coming out of Gaza, to manipulate the visual image, to manipulate the news coming out of Gaza through the way that they can control the media by physically oppressing journalists and applying pressure. And I'll just start, if I go over time, you'll tell me. A strict story. Israel says there's Hamas under the hospital, and so the BBC sends its cameras to the hospital, and they ask the head of the hospital, is there Hamas in your hospital? What does he say? And what does the doctor say? And what does the nurse say? And what does the patient say? There's no Hamas in the hospital. And so what does the viewer see? The viewer doesn't understand that this is an authoritarian regime, and anyone who would say to a Western journalist or to a Western television station, there's Hamas in the hospital, they would pay a price. And they think the doctor's like the doctor that treats their father, and they think the director of the hospital is like the director of the hospital in their local neighborhood. We've lost before we open our mouth. They've got some IDF spokesman says something, and all these people who are humanitarians, doctors, nurses, ambulance drivers, we've lost before we open our mouth. So I've given the bad news. Now I'm going to give the policy recognition. We have to keep fighting the Hasbara battle and never give up because we have to fight. And maybe we'll have small victories here and there, and maybe every now and then we'll get a big victory. Never give up. But what is ultimately important? Everything pales next to one overwhelming factor. We have to win the war. And if winning the war means we get bad publicity, so be it. Because once we win the war, everything else will fall into place. And if we keep focused on that goal, Israel needs to win this war. Hamas, at the end of this, cannot be allowed to rule Gaza Strip. Bottom line. We have to win the war. We have to get the hostages home. We have to remove the threat to Israel coming from Gaza. If we succeed in doing that, it's not only good for the Jewish people, that we will be safe on our southern frontier for the foreseeable future, but it's also good for peace. Because if you defeat the most extreme enemy of peace, maybe that gives a bit more oxygen to more moderate people on the other side. And you know those Arab countries who vote against us at the United Nations and on CNN will speak out against us, when you close the door, you know what they really think? They want Israel to win. And no one's going to make peace with a weak Israel. People will make peace with a strong Israel. So winning this war is not only good for Israel. I tell all our European friends, Israel winning the war is good for peace too.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. You know, I often had the impression, and many of you, I'm sure you did the same, as you're watching the media, most of the media, we know that there is one network that I think gave you a fair shake, but most did not. And I always had the impression that when they came to you or they came to any other spokesman, somebody from the IDF spokesman's office, that this is something they felt they needed to do, but they weren't really excited about the fact that they had to get an Israeli opinion or an opinion of someone who supported Israel. But you rose to the task many, many times. Gerald, your publication, NGO Monitor, certainly suggests that we have a problem with NGOs, otherwise there wouldn't be NGO Monitor. We're monitoring NGOs, largely in the so-called human rights community. And there are many in that category globally. We know about Human Rights Watch and we know about Amnesty International, long history for both. But there are many others who have been as venal. You've done much work in following the money trail, which funds and fuels these organizations and who directs them. These organizations have moved into high gear since October 7th. What can you tell us about their activity over the past year and a half? Perhaps a few egregious examples, maybe they're all egregious, and what can be done to counter their work and their influence on a host of governments and media, because they're out there all the time banging the drum.
That's a 3-minute assignment that I will try to also do in less than 5 minutes. I also want to acknowledge part of the NGO Monitor research and staff in general who are here, who do a lot of the heavy lifting. And I also want to say something about coming to this JNS conference, because I remember sitting and talking to some of the founders, Josh Katz and others, back X number of years ago about the need for an alternative. And JNS has really arrived, and this is tremendous. And it's a real honor to be part of this. To answer your question, I think that was what's called a leading question, right? Yes, to answer your question, I would say that, and from the research and other activities that we've done, that we would have a lot less problems from the UN, particularly from the Human Rights Council and everything else that's connected to it, or from the media, various media platforms, if the NGO juggernaut, huge engine, and it's a multi-billion-dollar engine, didn't exist or was much weaker. Examples after October 7th, I think everybody in this room could do them. Genocide. The use of the Holocaust, the use of the word that was coined in the shadow of the Shoah as a weapon against Israel and the Jewish people. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, Medicine Sans Frontières, also known as Doctors Without Borders. If I were to go through all 300 or more organizations that we've tracked that use the term genocide, and they invent a different definition, etc., but that doesn't make any difference because it gets repeated everywhere. Nobody actually reads those reports. They read the press releases, they read the 2 sentences in the New York Times, the headlines, and elsewhere, and that's it. And if you read the reports, which unfortunately we have to do sometimes, you realize there's absolutely, like they used to say about Oakland, there's no there there. There's no substance. So to carry on from what Fiamma and others have said, I don't think, I've given up on trying to change the views, the activities, the agendas, the poison from the NGO world. It's largely hopeless. There are a few exceptions, and maybe I'll mention a couple of the exceptions. What we have to do, much more than has been done in the last 20 years, and is a source of frustration, but I think we're there now, close to that, is to severely weaken their power to spread these lies, the propaganda, the blood libels, all that other language. It wasn't just genocide, it was intentional starvation. It was, of course, settler colonialism and everything else that's associated with Israel as an inherently evil country. It's not about 67 borders. It's all about Israel as being inherently evil. And that's what all this language that the NGO community propels, that's what it's about. So how do you weaken? And I think we are seeing signs now of willingness to tackle this body, this power that in fact has no legitimacy. And non-governmental organization, it's sometimes called civil society organization. They're supposed to be altruistic, they're supposed to be volunteer, they're supposed to be politically neutral, they're supposed to be experts. They're none of these things. And by exposing the complete emptiness and worse of these organizations, I think we're beginning to see a gradual reduction in their ability to have influence. You know, one of the things that we've seen out of Washington and the Trump administration in the last 3 months is a focus on the universities. It was started before, and I want to credit, I don't know if anybody's here from ISCAP and other organizations that have looked at the Qatar and foreign funding for universities, and the center of the universities as being the basis for so much. These aren't protests, this is mob violence against Jews, against the Zionist enemy. That's the Eighth Front. And now we're seeing some serious action being taken because within the universities, you'll take Harvard, and we have a report coming out on that hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Harvard University, if you look at some of the centers that claim to do human rights, and there are at least 3 of them, you look at the health policy framework in the School of Public Health, you see that they're full of people who do Palestinian or anti-Israel propaganda, all the language that I just talked about, through the university. They're ensconced inside of Harvard and Columbia and Stanford and Berkeley and many other universities under the heading, also European universities, under the headings of human rights, international law, health, all those other activities. And now you're seeing action being taken against them. One of the things that we're trying to do is make sure that when the funding for the universities are revealed, we'll also see who funds those specific programs, because I would not at all be surprised, to understate it, to see that it's Qatar, that's where that money goes, for the poisonous propaganda. I'll do this very quickly, and each one of these issues needs a lot more. Stay tuned to NGO Monitor for details. By what moral and logical ground do groups like Amnesty International USA and Human Rights Watch, are they considered to be charities? Are they considered to be nonprofits? These have budgets of hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Doctors Without Borders, the poison that what Israel's allegedly doing to the Palestinian healthcare system, and we saw no Hamas people, there are a few exceptions to that. They have a $2 billion a year budget, and they're one of the worst, specifically on the medical issue. So questioning their right to be considered to have the privileges of being a charity is something that needs to be undertaken, and I think that's something that can be done. The last point I want to make is that recently we've seen whistleblowers. I've been in this unfortunate business of monitoring NGOs for close to 25 years. I think, Malcolm, you were at the first time we started to talk about this right after 9/11, and it was after Durban. For the first time, we're seeing not just one, but a group of individuals, in other words, each one in a different organization, who have now come out and said, we have worked for these organizations. Danielle Haas worked for Human Rights Watch for 13 years. One could ask why she sat there for so long as a senior editor. But she talks about the anti-Semitism in the corporate culture. Also, people now coming out of the closet in sense of the hate and the anti-Semitism, and Amnesty and Doctors Without Borders and other places like that. I suggest, reading an article by Michael Powell in The Atlantic a couple of weeks ago on the internal anti-Semitism and citing a lot of these individuals. That's a big change. And if we can show to the members of the board and the donors who propel these organizations and who really know nothing about what's being done with their money, at least half of them, that their money is being used for exactly the opposite of what they think they're giving the donations for, I think we will make some significant progress in taking that part of the hate out of the picture.
Thank you, Gerald. Thank you, and thank you for the work that you do with NGO Monitor. Sam, let me pick up on a part of what I asked Fiamma earlier. You are in the political mix in a country that until very recently has been hypercritical and many times hostile to Israel. I'm thinking of the universal jurisdiction case against Arik Sharon, 2002, and a host of statements and UN votes since then. Belgium is one example, but it is not the only case in Europe where this is occurring and that has this kind of track record, if you will. In that kind of environment, how have you personally dealt with these issues within the country's political universe? Again, how much of this is anti-Semitic, and how much is a case of don't confuse me with the facts? So, floor is yours.
Thank you. Good noon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very honored and happy to be here because, and let me just start by illustrating why I'm here. I'm a Belgian member of parliament, and I'm almost ashamed to say that nowadays in Israel, because we are one of the most hostile countries, not only towards Israel, but also towards the Jewish community. And I say that also as a city councillor in Antwerp, where we have a very large Jewish community, more or less 20,000 people, although many Jews choose to leave, of course. And there are two moments in my life that are actually decisive for who I am as a human being and as a politician towards Israel and the Jews. And the first one was when I was 16-year-old, and my dad was a principal of a Jewish school in Antwerp, the Yafne school. And I remember driving there with my little backpack just to visit him and to see, because I was, of course, very curious to this Jewish school. I'm not Jewish, nor is my dad. And I remember arriving there and seeing all these cameras and seeing the black windows and having the security guards checking me and my backpack, because they didn't know me, of course, and they thought, who is this? And that was the first moment that I said, and I realized this is not normal. This is not normal. I'm talking about the 90s, that Jews have to live under such security measures in a city like Antwerp. The second moment was, unfortunately, quite recent, was, of course, the 7th of October. Because although I knew that anti-Semitism is not something just from the left or the right, I mean, you find it in all different types of groups of people, different political opinions, different religious backgrounds. But I must say that the 7th of October changed my view, not in a positive way, on the world, on human beings, and on how they reacted, of course, on this horrible atrocity. Just to say one thing, the video that was made, or the movie, if I may call it like that, about the atrocities of the 7th of October. It was shown in the parliament, where I'm a member of the Belgian parliament. Most members of parliament didn't want to go watch it. They refused. They refused to go watch it. And I think that is telling about how they want to close their eyes and keep closing their eyes. Because today I heard many good points to do hasbara, the word hasbara. You know the word hasbara, that triggers the Jew haters, because they always want to see conspiracies that the Jews are making. So if I'm sitting here and I'm hearing about advocacy for Israel and hasbara, then I have a lot of mixed feelings, because sometimes I see the more that I do hasbara or other people do hasbara, the worse it even gets with some people. So it's very subtle, it's very difficult, and to me it's actually mostly psychology, especially in Europe, of course. I mean, where we have our past with colonialism, with the Second World War, of course, the Holocaust. Yeah, you know, many people are raised, of course, with the idea never again, which is, of course, perfect, which is great. But they are now pointing exactly that thought against the Jewish people and against Israel. And why is that? Well, there are many reasons why that is. I mean, of course, anti-Semitism has always been there and it has been suppressed after the Second World War. But it was always there and it's coming out again now, directed towards the Jews. And it's a very evil cocktail, especially when it comes to members of parliament, of anti-Semitism that is already in their system, let's say, but also opportunism. You know, we have quite many leftist voters, especially with the young people, and we have a lot of Muslims in our classrooms, in our schools. And when I visit them to do debates there, especially in election time, yeah, then I feel the environment there, which is a mix of leftism, wokeism, and Islamic radicalism, you know, that has hijacked all classrooms in big cities, especially Antwerp and Brussels. And you cannot have a civil debate anymore. I mean, we all see the images of campuses in the whole West, but also below that, schools with children of 12 to 16 to 18 years old. When I go there for a debate, and it should be about environment or about traffic, all they want to debate about is Israel and Gaza for an hour. So they're completely brainwashed, of course, not just by the mainstream media, but also by their classmates, their Islamic classmates, who are, of course, extremely radical and focused on that conflict, on that concerning me, it's a jihadist war against Israel, but that's not at all how it is framed. So when it comes to politicians in Belgium, they look at their own career, of course, and they are just following what they think gives them the most votes. You know, the Jewish community in Belgium is, of course, much smaller than the Islamic community. It's that simple. It's demography. It's purely demography. And that's why it gets also worse and worse, because the demography is changing rapidly, not only in Belgium, but in the whole west of Europe. And it's shifting towards areas, cities with groups 30, 40, 50% of Muslims. And of course, they're making the shots now. And all these politicians, yeah, they don't want to know, even if we do good hasbara. And I was noting 3 points, you know, that I see constantly in the discussions in the parliament and also in the mainstream media, of which I always see that they don't know anything about Israel, about the Middle East. You know, they don't know the history of the conflict. They don't understand the nature of Islamic jihad, which is, of course, an essential part of the conflict. They don't know what it is to do warfare anymore, people, especially young people, let alone that they know what it is to do urban warfare. That is exactly what the IDF is doing now in Gaza, which is an extremely difficult warfare, the most difficult warfare that there is in terms of tactics and in terms of trying to kill, to eliminate the enemy. All these things, members of parliament, people in general, they don't know anything about it. But even if we want to, and let me conclude with that, even if we want to teach them about it, often they will not listen because they want to listen to their voters, you know, and that's maybe not a very happy note to end. I'm also not that optimistic, as you can maybe notice. But before I left, and maybe I can conclude with one positive note, before I left, I went to my Kurdish hairdresser, which is a very nice Kurdish Christian man, and I told him I was going to Israel, and he told me, please tell them that Israel takes over Syria, please. So that may be as a positive point to end. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. What? We have 3 minutes more? What do you do with 3 minutes? This is the question. So do you go to questions, or do you go, we could do a lightning round up here. Mark, what do you suggest? Sorry? You know what? I'll tell you what we'll do. Are there any questions? We'll take one question. Right there. Is there a microphone? Who's got a mic? Yeah, sounds out. Go ahead. Go ahead. Okay. but please direct it to a person rather than to the entire panel.
So I was especially impressed by all of you, but I have to mention Mr. Hanlein, Mr. Lieb. I think their direction is the correct one. I'm a hardliner, but I think that is what is necessary for international affairs to be taken by Israel. It has to be unapologetic, has to be resolved and determined. You are either for us or you're against us. After October 7th, if you do not have the moral clarity to understand a two-state solution is a modern euphemism for the final solution, then we don't want to have anything to do with you. Our allies will benefit immensely, and those who are on the other side will suffer because they will not have the blessings of Israel. So that's my proposal for the final resolution. I would hope that it's taken seriously.
Good, thank you. Thank you. Yes, Malcolm, go ahead.
Quick comment on that. It is a shame that we did not have a worldwide strike, or at least a worldwide demonstration on October 9th, that would have put the world on notice once and for all that we're going to hold them all to account. The failures here will be examined, but nobody's examining the failures on the part of the diaspora, and what we are doing in the next session, I'm going to address that in a more serious way. I want to sound one warning, and that is, think about what happens if there's a worldwide recession, which is not impossible right now. Who will be targeted? All of that we see today is the groundwork for what could come if there's a worldwide recession. And that is true in the United States, and it's going to be true worldwide. We have not yet really tried to anticipate and to plan ahead. We still react. I will talk about the failure of our community in that session, but I am against, by the way, the public criticism of other Jews. I think it's a big mistake. When we have criticism, express them internally, take actions internally, talk honestly and openly. But when we get the President of the United States to talk about crappy Jews, it's a big mistake for us. It's a failure. So we have to be very careful what we say publicly, how we say it. Doesn't mean we shouldn't say it. But I'm telling you, I am very concerned what will happen. And we see evidence already online that if there's a worldwide recession, and we're setting up a special lab to deal with capital markets and anti-Semitism, because we believe it will penetrate and permeate the economic systems around the world.
Okay, Malcolm, thank you very much. Sam, I wanted to say to you just one word. I mean, you were really on the front lines. You really are. You're a working, active member of the political class, and you see it right up front, and we appreciate your remarks and your coming here to speak about it. I also want to thank Chairman Bobby Rechnitz for his support. I thank all of my panel colleagues here, Malcolm and Brian, Fiamma, Mark, Gerald, and Sam. Thank you all for, I know each of you came to this particular program the entire 2 days, but also this particular program because you are concerned about these issues, and we appreciate the fact that all of you have come. I want to thank JNS for having this idea. And nothing, you know, they say everything is timing, and this meeting is of the moment, and we deeply appreciate all the efforts that JNS has made. So with that, thank you. I know there's a lot more to go the rest of the day and tomorrow. Thanks again for being with us.
We thank you, and thank you.
Thank you.